Hey there. I am Thalos Mar living on the edge of Greywater Valley where the soil is dry, the wind is cold, and debts cling to a man longer than mud. On paper, I'm the owner of a small farm. In truth, I'm just someone trying to hold on to the land my father left me before it gets seized. The barn roof leaks, the fences lean, the granary holds half what it should, and the 6 horses in the stable aren't worth what they once were. The place has fallen into disrepair over the years, bad seasons, rising costs, and one too many loans to keep it afloat. I still feed the animals, patch what I can, and rise each morning, but it's more habit than heart. That morning I rode into town just to buy some grain. The lender at the feed store grinned at me with teeth that looked borrowed. He gave me 2 months. 2 more months to pay up, or he'd take the horses, the land, whatever was left worth counting in that rundown house. I didn't argue. I just hoisted the sack of grain less than I needed, paid more than I could afford, and headed out as the sky tilted toward afternoon. The road home was long, dusty, and empty. I'd traveled it hundreds of times. Every bush, every rut in the mud, every bend was familiar to the point of boredom. But about a mile from Greywater Crossing, my horse halted on its own. By the roadside, at the foot of a low slope, was an overturned cart. One wheel broken, clean off the axle, half buried in mud. No banners, no markings of a big merchant caravan, just a cheap rig anyone could rent at a way station. I should have kept going. The light was fading fast, and a lone man stopping by a wrecked cart usually ends in one of two ways, finding trouble or becoming it. But then I heard the sound. Muffled. Weak. Urgent. A noise smothered by thick fabric. Not an animal caught in a trap. Not a clear cry for help. It was the kind of sound made by someone running out of air in the dark. I dismounted, drew my knife, and approached. The tarpaulin covering the top was tied down tight with heavy ropes, knots, meant to keep whatever was underneath from shifting or being found. Someone didn't want this discovered. I sliced the first rope, then the second. The tarp sagged. The first smell that hit me was stale sweat, metallic tang, and the sourness of a body confined too long. The sound came again, more frantic now. "I can't breathe!" A woman's voice, hoarse, breaking from the strain of suffocation. I yanked the tarp away hard. Under layers of sacking and ropes, curled up like an animal crammed into a crate, was an orc girl. Her knees pressed to her chest, hands bound behind her back legs, tied tight, mouth stuffed with a rag and looped around her head. One eye swollen purple, nearly shut. Lips and chin slick with drool and blood mixed together. Her skin was the ashen green of wet stone moss, but paled from asphyxiation and exhaustion. On her left wrist was an iron band etched with clan symbols, scratched from attempts to pry it off, but still locked firm. She looked at me, not pleading, not begging, just the blank stare of someone treated like cargo for so long they no longer believed in kindness. I knelt and cut the gag from her mouth first. She gasped like surfacing from deep water. 3 breaths, 4, then coughed violently, her body convulsing. "Easy," I said. "I'll cut the rest now." She flinched back instinctively as the blade neared, her whole body tensed in that ingrained twitch of someone touched too many times with ill intent. "Steady," I said, softer. "If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have left you to suffocate." She didn't trust me right away, but she had no strength left to fight. I sliced the ropes on her wrists, then her ankles. Once her hands were free, she pulled them to her chest like guarding something stolen too often. Her fingers were twisted at wrong angles. Not a birth defect. These were fingers that had been broken, snapped, and healed wrong. I offered my water skin. She bared her teeth immediately. "All right," I said. "I'll set it here." I placed the skin on the ground and stepped back 4 paces. She eyed me, then slowly reached for it. The way she drank told a story she'd been thirsty longer than days, but she sipped, measured, like someone who knew it could be snatched back any moment. When she lowered the skin, I asked, "Can you walk?" "Can't you stop asking?" She replied, her voice raw but clear. "I'll take that as no." She didn't argue. She just turned her head, scanning the road as if still expecting someone to appear. I glanced at the darkening sky, the wrecked cart, then back at her. I knew I was being foolish, but I also knew I couldn't leave her there. "There's a farm a mile from here," I said. "Walk or ride the cart, your choice. But stay here and you'll die tonight." She stared at me a long while, Then she slid off the cart, moving slow and pained but refusing help. Right before I hitched the reins to my horse, she said one thing like spitting it out through gritted teeth. "My name is Talvra." I didn't respond right away. I just climbed onto the seat and urged the horse on with the distinct feeling that I'd just hauled home not just a stranger, but a bleeding secret. It took nearly 40 minutes to haul the wrecked cart back to the farm. The sky had gone fully dark halfway through. The only sounds were the creaking wheels on stone, the horse's labored breaths, and the silence from behind me. Talvra didn't complain once about the pain, though every jolt of the cart made me hear her sharp intake of breath wounds reopening somewhere on her body. The farm came into view in the gloom, just as I'd always hated it. Fences leaning like Drunk's barn, looming shadowy roof black and smokeless, a place people left more than returned to. I stopped the cart right at the porch and lit a lantern. In the golden flicker, her injuries stood out, sharper bruises running from temple to neck, one shoulder hanging low like it had been dislocated before left eye barely slitting open. But what unsettled me most was how she eyed the house like a closed space full of walls, doors, and dead corners. "Come inside." She didn't budge. "It's cold out here." Cold doesn't kill orcs. But that bruised rib might. She quirked her lips slightly, acknowledging I wasn't talking nonsense. Still, she didn't step in. Instead, she slid off the cart, limped to the fence post in the yard, and sat on the ground back against the wood. Like that spot alone gave her a clear path to run, if needed. I fetched a thick wool blanket and set it a few steps away. "Don't need it," she said. "Just in case." I didn't push. I went back inside, leaving the door cracked so the kitchen fire's glow spilled onto the porch. From the window I saw her sitting still, eyes on the road, arms around her knees, the blanket untouched. I slept fitfully. Before dawn in the gray murk, a sharp crack woke me. Then another, rhythmic, deliberate. I grabbed the lantern and rushed out. Talvra was at the fence post, her left hand pressed flat against the wood. Her right gripped a finger on the left, pulling a lining, then slamming it hard against the post. Crack. She was resetting her own broken fingers. No cloth to bite down on, no groan. Just the sound of bone and joint meeting wood, a suppressed breath, then on to the next. The twisted digits were straightening bit by bit, in a way so painful my gut twisted just from hearing it. "Stop that." "A finger that doesn't work is a finger that gets you killed," she replied, eyes fixed on her hand. "Watch or help. Your choice." I'd seen people endure pain before, but hers was different. Not bravery, a ruthless discipline forged from whatever hell she'd come through. I fetched bandages, hot water, and thin wooden splints. After her last slam, sweat beading cold on her forehead, I helped wrap and secure the fingers with cloth and splints. She let me, but her body stayed tense, ready to strike back if I squeezed too hard. Afterward, I brewed 2 mugs of barley coffee. I set the second one on the porch step. When I came back from the barn after feeding the horses, it was empty. Talvra spoke little. I'd asked her name and she'd given it, but questions about where she'd come from, who had bound her, why she ignored. She just sat by the fence post, her eyes sweeping the house, the barn, the well, the paths in and out, mapping the terrain in her head for escape if it came to that. That afternoon, as I mended the eastern fence, she spoke from behind me. "Sold." I turned. She stood in the middle of the yard, face unchanged like she'd tossed a stone and was watching it sink. "What?" "You asked where I'm from. From the place they sold me." She paused. "My name is Talvra. You keep calling me Hay." I met her gaze, and she held it steady. "Thalos," I said, giving the full thing. "Thalos Mar." She nodded, committing it to memory. That evening I left a plate of food on the step. In the morning it was clean, the blanket folded neatly by the door. She hadn't stepped inside yet, hadn't claimed a spot by my fire, but she'd stopped eyeing everything like it would vanish. It was a small shift. And for someone like her, small shifts were whole new territories. On the third day, Talvra was gone from her spot by the fence post before I even stirred. I thought she'd left for good. But when I headed to the barn, there she was standing inside the stall of my most temperamental horse, the gray one I called Storm. That animal had turned half wild over the years, kicking out a hired hand's arm last season, biting me twice hard enough to draw blood, and never letting anyone step into its space without going berserk. Yet there it stood calm before Talvra, head-lowered ears tilted forward. She wasn't petting it, wasn't whispering, just standing there breathing in rhythm with it. I froze at the barn door mouth half open. "How did you do that?" Talvra didn't turn. I walked in. It let me breathe near it. That's different. The words hit me like an echo from someone who'd once explained horses to me the same way. Since then, no one had spoken of them as creatures with their own say in who approached. Talvra stepped out slowly. Storm just snorted softly. I stared at her like she was some new riddle. "Horses remember who tends them," she said. "You've stopped tending. They remember that." I didn't like hearing it, but I couldn't call her wrong. Over time, I'd just fed them, cleaned the stalls, shod them when needed, kept them alive, but not truly tended. That day, Talvra started working the yard without a word from me. She yanked rotten planks from the barn wall, sorted usable wood from scrap. She did it all with a strength that surprised me, stronger than me by far, even with her fingers still bound in bandages and splints. When I warned her a section of wall bore weight, she tapped the post twice and said, "The load's on this beam. That rotten board holds nothing anymore." She was right. We worked side by side through the afternoon. I hammered stakes. She held the board steady. I sawed lumber. She carried it away. One piece of rotten timber snapped clean in half, right in her hands, the crack sharp and final. Out of old habit, I laughed, a low, rough sound but genuine. Talvra whipped around, staring like I'd made a noise from another species. What was that sound? I was laughing. Humans laugh when things break. Sometimes, if it's not important. She pondered that, then said, "Orcs don't laugh. Never." Laughter exposes weakness. In the clan, opening your mouth, closing your eyes, letting your body loosen, that gets you struck. I went still, hammer in hand. Her words dragged up images of a brutal childhood I didn't need to see to picture. That evening we sat near the fire pit in the yard. The distance was still enough to say she hadn't fully entered the house, but closer than before. I asked about the fingers. This time she answered. "The first time I ran from the clan, I was 14, she said. They caught me at the river. The keeper pinned my hand to a rock and snapped each finger. Said without fingers I couldn't grip reins, couldn't ride, couldn't run." She paused, the firelight reflecting in her dark eyes like embers. "The second time I ran. The third, they sold me." Sold. The word hung heavier than anything she'd said before. Not killed, not beaten, but turned into something with a price. I had no wise words. I just poured more barley coffee and handed it over. She took it and shifted a bit closer to the flames. 3 days later, I rode into town to sell one of the mares, the brown one at the end that Talvra had patiently worked with over the weeks. The trader inspected her, hiding his shock poorly. The horse that had been half feral now walked smooth, followed the lead without bite or kick. He paid me 320 silver, enough to hold off the lender a while longer. When I got back with the coin, Talvra asked, "Which horse?" "The brown at the end. You sold cheap. It was worth 400. 320 is the price for no questions about who trained it." This time the corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. I used the money to pay down some debt. The lender counted the silver, looked up, and asked how a deadbeat like me suddenly knew business. "Someone taught me to keep what I have." He didn't get it. Didn't need to. Back home, Talvra was deepening the carving on the front gate with a sharp stone, 2 lines crossing a circle with small strokes like roots. The grooves were smoother, more certain now. "What's it mean in full?" I asked. She brushed off wood dust from her hands. "That this land has keepers. That anyone crossing the gate must account for them. I don't have enemies." She met my eyes straight on. I thought the same. I understood. No ban meant the past didn't vanish. The clan that sold her. The town kids throwing rocks at the fence. There'd be more tongues, stares, maybe trackers following old trails. But looking at that carving on the gate, I realized I no longer thought about selling the farm, about running to somewhere else. This land had been just a shelter once. Now it felt worth holding. That night we sat on the porch, each with a mug of coffee. Wind through the valley grass. Horses quiet in the barn. Everything I'd let slide was standing firmer around me like it had been waiting for the right hands to remember how to live. I thought the worst was behind us. The town kids throwing rocks at the fence and running off laughing that seemed like the extent of the cruelty Talvra had to endure. Selling the horses, patching the roof, rebuilding the barn, it felt like signs my life was finally turning upward. I was wrong. That night rain slashed against the roof like whips. I was positioning pots under the 4 new leaks I'd found when a soft tap came at the bedroom doorframe. Not a knock for entry. A controlled touch from someone fighting to stay composed. Talvra stood there, shoulders-soaked, eyes wider than usual, her left hand pressed hard against her stomach. "The band," she said through clenched teeth. I looked down. The Iron Clan band on her left wrist glowed dull red at the edges like it was heating from within. The skin around it blistered, steaming faintly in the rain. "What the? It's seeking," she said. "When the clan wants to drag back a runaway, the band awakens. It points the way." For the first time since I'd met her, I saw real fear on that face. Not the cold vigilance I knew, the kind of fear from someone who understood exactly what was closing in. "Get it off. It has no lock. I'll cut it. Slip and you shatter my wrist bone. Your hand's been broken before. That doesn't make you a better smith." I almost laughed at how sharp she stayed even then. But my hands were already shaking. I grabbed my father's old horseshoeing tools, a small anvil, chisel, round-headed hammer. I set the anvil on the porch under the oil lantern. Talvra sat on the step-arm, extended flat across its face. Rain pelted the overhang wind, gusting the flame unsteady. The band burned red like banked coals. "Place the chisel at the thinnest spot," she said. "Don't hesitate." I knelt. Her face was close now, sweat and rain mixing on her temples. Her eyes never left my hands. "Trust me?" I asked, not sure why I did right then. "Not entirely," she replied. Then quieter, "But I'm letting you do it anyway." I positioned the chisel's tip at the band's edge. That moment felt stranger than any embrace, any kiss I'd known. It was trust stripped bare, laying bone under another's hand and not pulling away. I swung the hammer. The metal pinged thin and sharp. The band cracked a small line. Talvra didn't cry out. She just gritted her teeth, her jaw twitching faintly. I swung again. The crack widened. The red glow flared bright, then dimmed. On the third, the band split in two, clattering to the step like raw iron. It vibrated an odd pulse, then went dead. The smell of hot metal and scorched skin mixed with the rain. Talvra lifted her arm, staring at the pale scar ring etched into her skin where the band had clamped for years. She touched it lightly, like brushing something newly absent from her body. "It won't find me anymore." "Good. Not entirely." She looked up, her eyes hollow in a new way. "If the band is broken, the clan considers the wearer dead, not runaway, not missing. Dead." I stayed silent. "I hated that band," she said. "It hurt. It guided hunters. It reminded me I belonged to what sold me. But—" she glanced at her bare wrist. "It was the last thing tying me to a place that was once home." Her words cut deeper than I'd expected. When my father died, I'd hated the sawmill for reminding me of him. When fire turned it to ash, it felt like losing him again. "Emptiness can fill over time," I said. "You talk like fixing a fence. This isn't a fence. My house wasn't a home at first. It's better now." This time she actually laughed, a small short thing, hoarse and strange and beautiful enough that I stared an extra beat to make sure it was real. "Tonight is the first I belong to no one," she said. I picked up the cooled halves of the band and set them in the ash bucket by the porch. "Then tonight, you're here as just you." Talvra watched me a long while. Rain fell, the lantern swayed, and in a night that should have held only storm metal clangs and fear, something else appeared between us, thin, unnamed, but real. After the night we split the band, everything shifted in ways I couldn't pretend not to notice. Talvra still slept in that half-in, half-out spot by the door for a few more days, the place she'd claimed from the start, but her gaze had changed. No more measuring distances to the nearest escape route. She began venturing deeper into the house without pausing at the threshold. She'd leave dishes in the sink instead of washing and returning them precisely like a guest. She'd complain about the porch roof needing an extra brace as if she had a stake in the place. I didn't object once. In fact, I started looking forward to the sound of her footsteps in the morning, the scent of barley coffee she'd brew, the ring of her hammer on the barn walls, the way Storm would dip its head as she passed. I noticed things smaller than I had any business noticing for a man who'd spent years numb, how her hair always escaped its tie at the nape after a day's work, how the corner of her mouth would twitch just slightly when I fumbled a nail, how she'd sit by the fire without a word and still make the house feel less empty. Then I rode into town to sell the second horse, the gray one Talvra had patiently tamed over weeks. The trader paid even higher than before. I took the silver straight to the lender. He counted it out, eyed me, and asked how a failure like me suddenly knew how to turn a profit. Someone taught me to keep what I have. He didn't understand. Didn't matter. Back at the farm, Talvra was deepening the carving on the front gate with a sharp stone, the two lines crossing a circle with those root-like strokes. The lines were smoother now, more assured. "What's it mean in full?" I asked. She brushed wood dust from her hands. "That this land has keepers, that anyone crossing the gate must reckon with them. I don't have enemies." She met my eyes directly. I thought the same. I got it. No ban didn't mean the past evaporated. The clan that sold her. The town kids pelting rocks at the fence. There'd be more wagging tongues, suspicious stares, maybe trackers on old scents. But staring at that carving on the gate, I realized I no longer thought about selling the farm, about fleeing somewhere else. This land had been mere shelter once. Now it felt worth defending. That evening we sat on the porch each with a mug of coffee. Wind whispered through the valley grass. Horses settled quiet in the barn. Everything I'd neglected stood steadier around me, like it had been waiting for the right touch to recall how to endure. "I used to want to sell it all," I said. "I know. You're right. I've been running without leaving the spot." Talvra stared out at the darkening fields. "I've run, too, 3 times. Caught twice, sold the third. Maybe no one's good at running." "Maybe." Silence stretched. Then I asked what I should have long before. "What do you want now, Talvra?" She turned. "You really want to know?" "Yes. I want to wake up in the morning knowing I'll come back here at night." She looked at her hands, the fingers once broken now working despite the scars. "Not cargo, not a runaway, not dead by clan law. I want to keep this land with you if you'll allow it." My chest tightened in a way that hurt and eased at once. I'm no poet with words, never have been. So I set down my mug, walked to the gate, and placed my hand on her fresh carving. "If this mark means the land's kept," I said, "then it means the keepers aren't just me anymore." Talvra rose and came to stand beside me. She looked at the mark, then at me. Close enough I could see every faint scar around her wrist where the band had gripped. "From the day they stuffed me in that cart," she said softly, "I thought if I survived, it'd be as something shoved from place to place. You gave me coffee food, a spot to sit, then a gate to carve a mark on. Do you know what you've done? I pulled you from a cart." "No." She shook her head. "You gave me a place to stop running." I don't recall who touched who first. Maybe my hand on her shoulder. Maybe her forehead resting lightly against my chest. All I know is we stood there on the porch, amid the cold fields and the fresh wood scent of the gate, and the silence between us wasn't a void anymore. It filled. Warmed became something real without needing a name. That night, she didn't unroll her blanket in the half-in, half-out spot. She brought it deeper inside near the hearth close to my chair and turned to look at me through the firelight. "Door still open?" she asked. "Of course." "Good." She settled on the floor inside the house, fully, no more towing the threshold. I glanced at the band's halves lying cold in the ash bucket by the porch, at the carving on the gate, at the house no longer echoing hollow with every wind gust. I thought back to the day I'd peeled back that tarp drawn by a choked cry, "I can't breathe." Back then, I'd meant to save a stranger from suffocating. I hadn't realized I was saving myself from a life that had been suffocating for years. And though we hadn't named it not love, not a vow, not marriage, I knew one thing clear. As I latched the door that night, Some things endure, without names, built stronger than iron. Forged from patched roofs, reinforced fences, 2 mugs of coffee each morning, a carved mark on a gate, and someone finally sleeping past the doorway.